Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sarge's Briefings. I'm Sarge, and if this is your first time joining me, I want to thank you for stopping by. Here on Sarge's Briefings, we break down trucking topics into plain English. No recruiter sales pitch, no industry jargon, and no confusing government language. Just honest information based on years of experience in the trucking industry. Today's topic is one that affects thousands of people every year. You worked hard. You spent weeks, maybe even months earning your CDL. You passed your written test. You passed your skills test. You finally walked out with that brand new Class A CDL in your wallet. And then, the phone doesn't ring. Applications seem to disappear into a black hole. One company tells you they need experience. Another says you're outside their hiring area. Someone else says they aren't hiring in your state. Before long, you're sitting there wondering, I did everything they told me to do. What happened? The truth is, graduating CDL school is a huge accomplishment, and you should absolutely be proud of it. But getting your CDL isn't the finish line, it's the starting line. There are several steps that happen between earning your license and climbing into your first truck. And unfortunately, a lot of CDL schools don't spend much time explaining what those steps actually look like. After more than a decade working with truck drivers and helping process applications, I've seen the same questions come up again and again. Why won't anyone hire me? Why is the process taking so long? What are recruiters actually looking at? And what can I do to improve my chances of getting that first opportunity? That's exactly what we're going to cover today. By the end of this briefing, you'll have a much better understanding of what happens after CDL school, what employers are looking for, some of the common roadblocks new drivers run into, and how you can put yourself in the best position to start building a successful trucking career. So grab yourself a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's get started. Now, the first thing I want every new CDL graduate to understand is this. Congratulations. Seriously, earning your CDL isn't easy. You invested your time, your money, and probably a whole lot of patience to get through school. Learn the equipment, pass your written exams, and complete your road test. That's something to be proud of. But here's where a lot of people get caught off guard. A CDL is a license. It isn't a job offer. Think of your CDL as the key that unlocks the front door. Now you can walk into the hiring process. But you still have to convince an employer that you're someone they want representing their company. A lot of new drivers expect that the day they graduate, recruiters are going to start fighting over them. Sometimes that happens. More often than not, it doesn't. And that's perfectly normal. Every trucking company has its own hiring standards. One company may hire graduates straight out of school. Another may require additional training. Some only hire in certain states. Others have different requirements based on the type of freight they haul or where they operate. There isn't one set of rules that every trucking company follows. That's why you might qualify for one job, but not another. And that doesn't necessarily mean you've done anything wrong. It simply means you're looking at different employers with different hiring requirements. The biggest mistake I see new drivers make is thinking that getting turned down by one company means nobody is going to hire them. That couldn't be further from the truth. Sometimes it's simply a matter of finding the company that's the right fit for your background, your location, and where you are in your career. Remember this. Your CDL got you to the starting line. Now it's time to begin building your career. In the next section, I'm going to show you what actually happens after you submit that application, because a lot more goes on behind the scenes than most new drivers ever realize. Let's take a look at what recruiters are actually reviewing when your application comes across their desk. Now let's talk about what actually happens after you submit a job application. A lot of new drivers picture their application popping up on somebody's computer. The recruiter sees they have a CDL, and 5 minutes later the phone rings. I wish it worked that way, but there's quite a bit more going on behind the scenes. The first thing most recruiters do is start reviewing your application. They're looking at several pieces of information before they ever decide whether you're a fit for a particular position. One of the first things they'll verify is your CDL and your driving history. They'll make sure you have the proper license for the job and review your motor vehicle record to see if there are any issues that could affect hiring. Next comes your work history. And here's something I tell drivers all the time. Recruiters aren't necessarily looking for someone who's had the same job for 20 years. They're looking for consistency. If you've had several jobs, be prepared to explain them honestly. Good communication goes a long way. Depending on the company and the type of freight involved, they may also review criminal history where it's legally appropriate and relevant to the position. Every company has its own hiring policies, so what one company accepts may be different from another. Another thing many new drivers don't realize is that your location matters. Just because a company advertises nationwide doesn't mean every account hires from every city. Some dedicated accounts have very specific hiring areas. If you live outside that area, it doesn't necessarily mean you aren't qualified. It may simply mean that particular position isn't available where you live. And finally, something that sounds simple but causes more delays than you would believe: an incomplete application. Missing employment dates, incorrect phone numbers, leaving out previous employers, forgetting to list a CDL school. Those little details can slow everything down because someone has to stop processing your application and start tracking down missing information. The easier you make it for a recruiter to review your application, the faster the hiring process usually moves. Now, just because your application checks all the boxes doesn't mean you're automatically hired. There are still a few things that can slow the process down. Let's talk about some of the most common roadblocks new drivers run into. Even good applicants get turned down sometimes. The next question is, why? So let's say you submitted your application. Everything looks good. Then you get a phone call telling you that you don't qualify for that position. Or maybe you never get a call at all. It's frustrating. But before you assume nobody wants to hire you, let's talk about some of the most common reasons drivers run into roadblocks during the hiring process. The first one is experience. Not every trucking company hires new graduates. Some accounts require 6 months of experience. Others want a year or even more. That doesn't mean you're a bad driver. It simply means that particular customer or account has established minimum experience requirements. Another common issue is where you live. I know I've mentioned hiring areas already, but it's worth repeating because I see this every single day. A driver may live just 20 or 30 miles outside a company's hiring radius. They're fully qualified, they've got a clean record, and they want the job. But if they live outside the hiring area for that account, the recruiter usually can't make an exception. It's not personal. They're simply following the hiring guidelines established for that position. Background issues can also affect hiring. That could include recent moving violations, accidents, or criminal history, depending on the company and the type of freight being hauled. The important thing to remember is this: different companies have different hiring standards. Being declined by one company doesn't automatically mean you'll be declined by another. Then there's something that's completely avoidable: an incomplete application. If dates are missing, employers are left off, or important information isn't included, the recruiter has to stop what they're doing and try to fill in the blanks. That slows down the process for everyone involved. And finally, let's talk about expectations. One of the biggest mistakes I see new drivers make is believing they're going to land the highest paying job with the best home time immediately after graduating. Sometimes that happens. Most of the time, it doesn't. Your first trucking job is about gaining experience, proving yourself, and building a solid work history. The opportunities usually get better as your experience grows. Don't measure your entire career by your first job. Measure it by where that first job allows you to go. Now, once you've been approved for a position, what actually happens next? Let's walk through the process from a job offer all the way to orientation. Congratulations, you've made it through the hiring process, and the recruiter tells you they'd like to move forward. A lot of new drivers think that's the finish line. In reality, it's the beginning of the onboarding process. The first thing you'll usually receive is what's called a conditional job offer. Notice I said conditional. That means the company intends to hire you as long as everything checks out. There are still a few steps that have to be completed before you're officially behind the wheel. Depending on the company, they may verify your previous employment, review any remaining background information, and make sure all of your paperwork is complete. You'll also need to complete any required pre-employment testing, such as a DOT drug test, and make sure you've met all of the company's hiring requirements. If everything comes back as expected, the next step is usually scheduling orientation. Many companies will arrange your travel to the orientation location. Some may purchase a bus ticket or airline ticket. Others may reimburse certain travel expenses. Every company handles this a little differently, so be sure you understand exactly what's expected before you travel. Once you arrive, orientation begins. This is where you'll complete company paperwork, learn their safety policies, review company procedures, and get introduced to the equipment and expectations. If you're a brand new CDL graduate, you'll most likely be assigned to a driver trainer. Now let me clear up one misconception. Getting assigned to a trainer doesn't mean the company thinks you're a bad driver. Quite the opposite. Every company wants to make sure you understand their way of doing things before they turn you loose in one of their trucks. Your trainer isn't there to embarrass you. They're there to help you make the transition from CDL school to the real world of trucking. Ask questions, take notes, listen more than you talk. This is where you'll probably learn more practical trucking in a few weeks than you learned during your entire time in CDL school. Once you've completed training successfully, you'll finally be assigned your own truck and begin your career. But before we wrap this up, I want to leave you with a few pieces of advice that I believe can make a real difference during your first year on the road. Let's talk about setting yourself up for long-term success. As we wrap this up, I want to leave you with a few pieces of advice that I wish every new driver would take to heart. First, always be honest. If you've made mistakes in the past, don't try to hide them. Recruiters deal with drivers every single day, and most problems can be worked through if everyone is upfront from the beginning. What causes the biggest problems is finding out later that something wasn't disclosed. Second, stay in touch with your recruiter. If your phone number changes, if your plans change, or if you can't make an appointment, pick up the phone and let someone know. Communication goes a long way in this industry. Third, when you're assigned to a trainer, listen. CDL school teaches you how to earn your license. Your trainer teaches you how to become a professional truck driver. Pay attention, ask questions, take advice. You don't have to know everything on your first day. None of us did. Fourth, don't worry about being the fastest driver on the road. Focus on being the safest. Nobody remembers who got to the receiver 30 minutes early, but everyone remembers the driver who had an avoidable accident. Take your time, do the job right. Finally, start building your reputation from the very first load. Show up when you're supposed to. Do what you say you're going to do. Treat customers with respect. Take care of the equipment. Drive safely. Your reputation will follow you throughout your career, and it's one of the most valuable things you'll ever own. I've seen drivers build incredible careers simply because people knew they could be counted on. Remember, your first trucking job probably won't be your last, but the habits you develop during that first year can stay with you for the rest of your career. So make those habits good ones. Your CDL got you the opportunity. Your attitude, your work ethic, and your professionalism will determine how far that opportunity takes you. Now, let's head back to the desk, and I'll leave you with a few final thoughts before we wrap things up. Thanks for spending a little time with me today. I hope this briefing helped answer some of the questions you may have had about what really happens after CDL school. If there's one thing I want you to remember, it's this. Getting your CDL isn't the finish line, it's the starting line. The trucking industry can provide a great career, but like any profession, it takes time to build experience, earn trust, and develop the skills that make you successful. Don't get discouraged if your first application doesn't work out. Don't give up if your first interview isn't a perfect fit. Every experienced driver you see out on the road today was new once. They all had a first day. They all had questions, and they all had to prove themselves. If you keep learning, stay professional, work safely, and keep a positive attitude, you'll be giving yourself the best chance to build a long and successful career. I want to thank you again for watching Sarge's Briefings. If you found today's video helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you'd click that like button. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future briefings, Coffee with Sarge, Sarge's Hotline, and our weekly shorts. And if there's a trucking topic you'd like me to cover in a future briefing, leave it down in the comments below. I read every one of them, and your suggestion may become one of our next episodes. Until next time, drive safe, make good decisions, and I'll see you at the next truck stop.